Why Europeans feared the walls of old Oyo and Ijebu Kingdom. A forgotten African military genius. A story history tried to whisper away. In the age when European cannons shattered castles across Asia and the Americas, there were walls in West Africa they did not dare to test. Not because the walls were tall alone. Not because they were made of stone alone. But because behind those walls stood kingdoms that had already mastered war, intelligence, psychology, and total territorial control. These were the walls of old Oyo and the Ijebu Kingdom, defenses so effective that European traders, missionaries, and soldiers recorded them with fear, frustration, and respect. And the most disturbing truth? Before we dive into the main story, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell notification button for more interesting video like this. Europeans did not conquer these kingdoms by force. They waited for them to fall from within. Old Oyo was not a city. It was a system. At its height, 17th to 18th centuries, Old Oyo controlled vast territory through a network of walled cities, cavalry units, and layered defenses that made direct invasion nearly impossible. Why Europeans feared Oyo's walls. Oyo cities were surrounded by deep trenches, earthen ramparts, and thick walls reinforced with timber and clay, designed to absorb impact, not shatter. Oyo's fearsome horsemen could strike invaders before they reached the walls. Europeans knew that even landing an army inland would mean facing fast-moving, disciplined cavalry unfamiliar to forest warfare. The walls weren't silent. Drums, horns, and ritual displays signaled not just soldiers, but the entire society mobilizing for war. In African warfare, the line between civilian and soldier disappeared. Oyo's walls were ritually fortified. Invaders believed they were entering land protected by ancestral forces. Europeans dismissed this publicly, but their private journals tell a different story. European traders stayed at the coast. They negotiated. They bribed. They waited. They never marched on old Oyo. If Oyo inspired caution, Ijebu inspired panic. For centuries, the Ijebu Kingdom controlled the vital trade routes between the coast and the interior of Yorubaland. Any European who wanted access to the inland markets had one problem. Why Ijebu walls terrified Europeans? Ijebu walls stretched for over 160 kilometers, among the longest pre-industrial defensive systems on Earth. Deep moats, towering embankments, and narrow controlled entrances made surprise attacks impossible. Ijebu didn't fight Europeans with guns. They fought them with denial. No passage. No inland trade. No missionaries. No soldiers. Every forest path, river crossing, and road was monitored. European travelers disappeared not into war, but into detention, expulsion, or negotiation. While Europe conquered through expansion, Ijebu defended through containment. They starved colonial ambition without firing a shot. European records openly admit this. The Ijebu country is closed, inaccessible, and resolute. This was not fear of savagery. This was fear of control. Europeans feared these walls because they represented something dangerous. African states that could not be rushed, African cities that could not be stormed, African systems that could not be bullied. The walls meant time. And time is the enemy of empires. So Europe did what it always does when walls cannot be broken. They waited. They watched. They exploited internal conflicts. They used treaties, missionaries, and indirect rule. And when the walls finally fell, it was not to cannons. It was to betrayal, civil strife, and colonial manipulation. Old Oyo collapsed due to internal political struggles and external pressure from jihadist states, not European invasion. Ijebu's walls stood until 1892, when British forces finally used modern artillery, not bravery, to break through. But by then the story had already been rewritten. The walls were labeled primitive. The kingdoms were called backward. The fear was erased. Today fragments of those walls still exist. Covered by grass. Ignored by textbooks. Silent to tourists. Yet here is the question history avoids. If Europeans truly found African societies weak, why did they wait centuries at the gates? And more importantly, what other African fortresses, strategies, and victories were erased, because they terrified the world that came to conquer them? This story didn't end with the fall of the walls. It ended with history choosing not to remember. Want more stories like this? Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our story, because this is just getting started.